So, James, you know that on LBC we've been hearing for weeks now from devastated people who own flats all over the country which cannot be sold. There's thought to be around 3 million of them trapped in this position with unsellable homes, either because they can't get the cladding, whatever cladding it might be, on their building passed as safe, or because they've had the test, they've had their building surveyed, and real issues like combustible cladding, combustible insulation, and a host of other design and building safety faults have been found, which now need to be fixed. And that can take years and can cost millions. And it means that people really overnight can realise that their homes, what should be their place of safety, is actually a fire trap. Now, I've discovered or uncovered a really extreme case of this problem, though, which is that some flats are so unsafe in this country that people cannot get fire insurance. Leanne owns a flat in one of 2 blocks in Albion Works, which is in central Manchester. Now, it has a huge slew of problems. There's timber and foam cladding, polystyrene insulation and woolen balconies. And they got an email 2 weeks ago from the building owner and manager telling them that they were completely unprotected if there was a fire.
Our building currently has a level of insurance, but it isn't covered for any fire damage at all. For a couple of weeks, it was actually completely uninsured for anything. So at the moment, myself and my neighbours are terrified as to what this means to us, not being covered with any sort of fire damage. But we're very much aware that if anything happens to our building at the moment, we would still be expected to pay mortgages. We would still be expected to go on as if life was normal with no property.
Gosh.
Now, insurance is a big issue here, and we hear this a lot from people. Normally, when dangerous cladding is found, people report that their building's insurance it doubles, trebles, in some cases it can rocket by as much as 10 times. So people who used to have a bill for the whole block in the tens of thousands suddenly find that bill going up to the hundreds of thousands, which is a huge problem, of course,
to pay
in itself. It's massive bills that come out of these flat owners' service charges, and which really they don't have any choice but to pay. But of course, in this instance, in this extreme, Leanne's home is so dangerous that their old insurer just thought it was too risky. They wouldn't cover it anymore at all. And now the building owner, Artisan H2, so they are working day and night to try and get full insurance. Now, I've been speaking about this to Martin Boyd, who's chair of the charity Leasehold Knowledge Partnership, and he tells me he knows of at least 9 other cases where this has happened.
If you've not got adequate level of cover, you will be in technical breach of your mortgage terms. Now, the lender's very unlikely to come and foreclose on your mortgage at the moment if you're living in a cladding site on the grounds that the flats aren't actually worth any money. If the insurers have got that nervous about the building, then there has to be a huge question, should people actually be living in it?
Now, separately, the bill to eventually fix Leanne's building, that's expected to be in the millions of pounds, and that's costs that would likely fall to her and to her roughly 100 neighbours. They have applied for the government's £1 billion fund to remove dangerous cladding, but it's first come, first served. And as we've discussed before, James, by the government's own analysis, that £1 billion is nowhere near enough money to fix all of the dangerous buildings which need it.
We've applied for the funding, but we're really not confident that we're actually going to get any of it. It's only £1 billion, which at the moment is an absolute, really ridiculously small. First come, first served. So it very much depends on you having all your investigations done and having your tender prices in. So we've not got our fingers crossed for that. I think what needs to happen is that the government needs to step back in, reassess all of these buildings that are entering their tender costs right now, and understand that that's not going to cover anything.
Now, the real cost to make safe all of those high-rise buildings actually thought to be more than £3 billion.
Okay.
So the government's put up 1. For buildings over 18 metres is actually thought to be 3. But earlier in the year, the Housing Select Committee themselves said that they thought the government should pay for shorter buildings too, which puts the actual total cost, the bill to fix this crisis, closer to £15 billion.
And the likelihood of that happening in the current climate?
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
There's been growing calls amongst MPs, particularly as the extent of this crisis has been realised in recent weeks and recent months. More MPs have been calling for the fund to be expanded. And as I mentioned, the Housing Select Committee at the start of the year, or certainly around springtime, said the government should front all of this money and then, try and recoup some of it back later if it needed to. The government responded a couple of weeks ago to that those recommendations, basically saying a flat no. They've put up £1.6 billion already, and I think the sense really is that taxpayers shouldn't be forced to pay for these issues. But of course, what we're seeing is people like Leanne then end up being forced to shoulder the burden of, bills in the tens of thousands.
You've covered this. You've led the field on this coverage. You say LBC has, but it's almost entirely down to you, Rachael Venables. How do you see it ending?
It is exceptionally difficult. There's no two ways about it. I think things at the moment cannot continue as they are. It feels like something has to change, but it's very difficult to know what. Because what you see, we've talked about the EWS1 form and insurers responding in this way. I think many people see them as responding naturally, organically to a situation which is based on decades of poor regulation. The Grenfell tragedy, and a lot of it is understandable. And I think something does really need to shift. But a lot of people are quite unsure as to what that is.
And how high have eyebrows risen in the corridors of power with your reporting? I mean, people who perhaps bear some political responsibility for fixing the problem, even though they're not responsible for the problem. That's what politics is often. Are people as shocked as we are in the corridors of power by what you've unearthed and what you continue to discover?
It feels as though people are, to some extent, people were aware of this issue. I mean, We've known about buildings with cladding being unable to sell since immediately after Grenfell. I think the scale of this has shocked people, and the sheer amount of people who are, for example, prepared to ring into LBC and tell us about their experiences around the country. I think that has surprised many people, absolutely.
Rachel, there'll be more.
I
think that's a prediction I can make with some confidence. There will be more on this.